In today's episode, we are going to look at the question of what is law from the lens of John Austin, who was one of the most important legal philosophers of the 19th century. So what makes a law a law? Is it because it's just, or because it's moral, or because it's commanded by someone powerful enough to make us obey them? We'll discuss what Austin's definition of law and sovereign was, the criticisms leveled against his definition, especially by H.L.A. Hart, and why his theory may still be relevant today. Hi there and welcome back to the channel. In this channel, we talk about the fascinating world of law in simple and understandable terms. And sometimes we explore the more philosophical questions like what is law and why do we follow the law. And in today's episode, we are going to explore John Austin and his command theory of law. Let's get started. Before we get started, I wanted to mention that I too have written a book which tries to answer this question of what is law by considering the opinion given by many different writers. You can read it as an ebook on Amazon Kindle or order a copy of it from Amazon. It's also available on Gumroad as a digital download. In the book, I explore a lot of legal theories, including that of John Austin. You can check it out by clicking on the link in the description below. Let's get back to John Austin. John Austin is a famous English legal philosopher who lived from 1790 to 1859. His theory can be found in his book The Province of Jurisprudence Determined, published in 1832, and the Lectures on Jurisprudence, which was published after his death in 1863. Austin lived at a time when law was often mixed together with religion and morality, but he completely disagreed with this school of thought. So he set about to define legal theory devoid of religion and morality, and in doing so he created one of the most influential and controversial theories in legal philosophy. He said law is a command made by a political superior for a political inferior backed by sanctions. So what exactly did Austin mean when he said law was a command made by a sovereign backed by sanctions? For Austin, all laws had three essential elements that they needed to satisfy. Number one, a command. Number two, a sovereign who gives that command. And number three, a sanction, which is the punishment or consequence for disobedience. Let's take a simple example. When the government says every citizen must pay income tax, that's a command. The sovereign, in this case the state, issues the order, and if you fail to comply, there's a sanction, maybe a fine or maybe imprisonment. According to Austin, that's what makes it a law. On the other hand, if your parents tell you to be polite or your religion tells you to love thy neighbor, those might be moral rules, but they are not laws in Austin's sense because they are not backed by sanctions enforced by the state. Let's dive deeper into what Austin called a command. According to him, a command was an expression of a wish by a superior to an inferior that they do or abstain from some act, accompanied by a threat of punishment if they fail to comply. So the reason why it becomes a law is because it's issued by someone with authority and it's backed with a consequence. Think of a traffic law like stop at the red light. That's a command. You can choose to disobey it, but if you do, you will face a sanction, a fine or points on your license. Hart believed that it is this element of compulsion, which is the possibility of a punishment, that separates legal rules from moral or social rules. For example, if your friend tells you don't lie to me, you may obey out of respect or out of morality. But if you don't obey it, there is no punishment. But seriously, don't lie. Austin would say such a demand is not a law because it's not backed by a sanction. In Austin's definition, it is the fear of punishment and not the moral obligation which keeps the people obedient to the law. Next, let's talk about the sovereign, which is also an essential feature in Austin's definition. For Austin, a sovereign is a person or body of persons who the bulk of society habitually obeys and who does not habitually obey anyone else. In a monarchy, this might be the king or the queen, and in a democracy, it might be the parliament. The key idea here is habitual obedience. Basically, the people don't obey the sovereign because of respect or because they think it's moral, but because they recognize the power of the sovereign as a habit. For example, when parliament passes a law, the citizens generally obey them, but the parliament itself doesn't obey another earthly authority. That's what makes them the sovereign. Austin's sovereign isn't necessarily a tyrant, but it's the ultimate legal authority in a society. And finally, we have the sanction. Austin says that the evil which will be incurred in case a command is disobeyed is frequently called a sanction. Every command of the sovereign, according to Austin, is backed by a sanction. That is a threat of harm or a penalty for disobedience. This means if there is no punishment for breaking the rule, then it's not a law in the eyes of Austin. For instance, always be kind is a good piece of advice, but it's not a law because it's not backed by a sanction. But do not steal is law because if you steal, you will be punished by the legal system. Although Austin's theory was revolutionary, it has been severely criticized. The most famous critic was H.L.A. Hart, who in the concept of law argued that Austin's theory was too crude and mechanical to describe a modern legal system. Let's look at some of Hart's key objections. Number 1, not all laws are commands. Hart points out that many laws don't impose duties. Some grant powers to the citizen. For example, laws that let you create a will or form a company or enter into a contract don't impose a duty. They are enabling laws, therefore they are not commands. Instead, they are power conferring rules. So therefore they don't fit Austin's definition. Number 2, not all laws have punishments. Hart points out that there are many laws which don't have a sanction in the traditional sense. Some laws only have a nullity for non-compliance. Consider a law which gives you the power to get married. It lays down some conditions which you must satisfy in order to comply with the law, like registering the marriage. But if you don't comply, there is no punishment. The only thing that will happen is that the marriage will be null and void. Number 3, law is followed because of authority and not because of sanctions. Hart believes that the law is not followed because of the fear of a punishment. Instead, he believes that the reason why people follow the law is because they believe that the lawmaker has the authority to make law. For instance, why do you follow a law that says do not steal? Is it because you're afraid of the punishment, or because the law has been passed by someone who has authority to make law? Austin believes it's the latter. Number 4, ignoring the internal point of view. Hart points out that people follow the law not just because they fear punishment, but because they see them as binding standards of behavior. For example, most of us don't obey traffic signals just because we fear the police. We obey them because we believe it's the right and expected thing to do in a functioning society. So law is not just about external fear, but it's about social consciousness. Number 5, habitual obedience is not a valid metric to measure sovereignty. Hart explains that a modern sovereign cannot be decided by habitual obedience. Consider a war-torn area controlled by a rebel group. Now, depending on how long this war has been going on, the people in that area might be following those rebels out of habit, but that doesn't make them a legitimate sovereign. Alternatively, consider a sovereign who has been newly appointed. They still don't have habitual obedience of the people because habitual obedience is something that develops over time. But that doesn't mean that the legitimately appointed sovereign is not the ruler of that country simply because they don't have habitual obedience. Despite all these criticisms, Austin's theory still remains hugely influential in society. Let's look at some of the reasons why. Number 1, Austin made law a separate discipline. Austin's biggest contribution was separating law from morality. That's the foundation of legal positivism, which dominates legal theory even today. He's one of the pioneers who believed that the law doesn't need to be moral for it to be valid. Number 2, his theory is relatable to the average citizen. For an average citizen who is stopping at a traffic light, the internal reasoning for following the law might be too complicated. He stops at the light because he doesn't want to get a fine. This thinking is baked into Austin's theory. It appeals to the masses. Number 3, the black letter of the law is easy to follow. Austin said that the law is what you see, which has been passed by the lawmakers. Basically, what you see is what you get. Whether you agree with this or not, the law is black and white for all of us to see. Number 4, Austin's definition of the sovereign is relatable. Often in real life, the person who controls a society is the person who is habitually obeyed by the people. A tyrannical leader in a war-torn area may be habitually obeyed by the people because he has the ability to punish them for disobedience. So in reality, it is the ruler who has habitual obedience who will be considered the sovereign and not necessarily the person who is being legitimately appointed into that position. So while Austin's theory cannot perfectly describe a modern legal system, his theory is foundational to understanding how a legal authority operates. So to wrap up, Austin saw law as a command backed by sanctions issued by a sovereign who is habitually obeyed. His theory was simple, logical, and groundbreaking. So despite Hart's criticisms, Austin's theory still remains a foundational and influential theory in the modern day. Next, check out this video which is on screen now, which explores the differences between positivism and natural law, which is the area of law that believes law and morality should be connected. And let me know your thoughts. Do you think law is simply a command and a punishment? Or is it something deeper? Let me know in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.